Exodus, the journey of freedom, a detailed narrative of deliverance and divine covenant. The story of Exodus stands as one of the most profound narratives in the Bible, an epic tale of suffering, hope, divine intervention, and the birth of a nation. It captures the journey of the Israelites from cruel bondage in Egypt to the cusp of freedom and the formation of their identity as God's chosen people. This narrative weaves together the voices of kings and slaves, miracles and laws, human frailty and divine glory. In this retelling, we will immerse ourselves in every intricate detail. The atmosphere in Pharaoh's palace, the cries of the Hebrew slaves, the thunder of the plagues, the awe-inspiring spectacle at Mount Sinai, and the establishment of the covenant that would define the Israelite people for generations. This is not just a history. It is a living story of faith, perseverance, justice, and God's unyielding promise. The oppression of the Israelites in Egypt. Long before the dawn of the Exodus, the descendants of Jacob, known as the Israelites, had settled in Egypt. They had originally arrived during a great famine, invited by Joseph, a son of Jacob, who had risen to power as Pharaoh's second-in-command. For many years, the Israelites prospered in the land of Goshen, living in peace and growing in number. But generations passed, and the memory of Joseph faded. A new Pharaoh, one who did not know Joseph, ascended the throne. He grew fearful of the growing population of Israelites, who were now many thousands strong. His heart hardened, seeing them not as friends but as a potential threat to his kingdom. So began a dark chapter in Israel's history. The Egyptians imposed harsh slave labor upon the Israelites. They forced them to build the cities of Pithom and Ramses, fortresses to defend the kingdom. Men, women, and children toiled under the hot sun, carrying heavy bricks, digging canals, and performing backbreaking labor. Despite the cruelty, the Israelites multiplied and thrived, their faith and unity keeping them strong. Pharaoh, desperate to halt their growth, commanded the Hebrew midwives to kill all newborn Hebrew boys at birth. But the midwives, fearing God, disobeyed Pharaoh and allowed the boys to live. When Pharaoh confronted them, they answered wisely, saying, "Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive." Frustrated by his failure, Pharaoh decreed a more sinister plan. Every Hebrew boy who was born was to be cast into the Nile River and drowned. The birth of Moses. Amid this oppression, a Levite family from the tribe of Levi gave birth to a son. The child was strong and healthy, but his mother knew he was at grave risk. To save him, she crafted a small basket of bulrushes, waterproofed it with tar and pitch, and placed her baby gently inside. Then she set the basket among the reeds by the riverbank, entrusting her child to God's protection. Moses' sister, Miriam, watched carefully from a distance to see what would become of the child. As fate would have it, Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe at the river. She saw the basket and sent her maid to retrieve it. Upon opening it, she found the crying infant and was moved with compassion. Recognizing the child was Hebrew, Pharaoh's daughter decided to raise him as her own son. Miriam courageously approached and offered to find a Hebrew woman to nurse the child. Moses' own mother was hired to nurse and care for him until he was old enough to live in the palace. Thus, Moses was raised in the royal household, educated in all the wisdom of Egypt, yet always carried in his heart the knowledge of his people's suffering. Moses flees to Midian. As Moses grew, his awareness of his people's plight deepened. One day, seeing an Egyptian taskmaster beating a Hebrew slave, Moses' sense of justice erupted. In anger, he struck the Egyptian down and hid the body in the sand. When the act became known, Pharaoh sought to kill Moses. Fearful for his life, Moses fled Egypt and traveled far into the desert, to the land of Midian. There, he met the priest Jethro and his daughters. Moses helped them water their flocks, and in gratitude, Jethro gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. Moses settled in Midian as a shepherd, tending the flocks on the rugged hillsides. Yet even in exile, Moses could not forget his people. The burning bush. One day, while tending sheep near Mount Horeb, Moses saw a remarkable sight. A bush engulfed in flames but not consumed by the fire. Curious, Moses approached. From the bush, God's voice called out to him, "Moses, Moses." "Here I am," Moses replied. God told Moses he had seen the suffering of the Israelites and was sending Moses to deliver them from Egypt. "But who am I to go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" Moses asked, trembling. God reassured him with promises of his presence and power. He gave Moses signs to perform, turning his staff into a serpent and his hand becoming leprous and then healed again, to convince the Israelites and Pharaoh. Moses hesitated, pleading that he was slow of speech. God appointed his brother Aaron to be his spokesperson. With a mixture of fear and faith, Moses accepted his mission. Confrontation with Pharaoh. Returning to Egypt, Moses and Aaron confronted Pharaoh, demanding in God's name, "Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness." Pharaoh scoffed, refusing to free the Israelites. Instead, he increased their labor, making their burdens heavier and punishing them more severely. Yet Moses persisted, warning Pharaoh that God's judgment would come upon Egypt. This led to the epic series of plagues that struck the land, waters turning to blood, swarms of frogs, lice and flies, the death of livestock, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and finally, the death of the firstborn. Each plague was a divine demonstration against Egypt's gods and Pharaoh's arrogance. The 10 plagues of Egypt. The land of Egypt was soon to feel the weight of divine justice in a way it had never known before. Each plague was a direct challenge to the gods the Egyptians worshipped, exposing their powerlessness before the God of Israel. Pharaoh's heart remained hard through it all, even as devastation spread. The first plague, water turns to blood. Aaron stretched out his staff over the Nile River, and immediately the waters turned into blood. The fish died, the river stank, and the Egyptians could no longer drink from it. For 7 days, the Nile flowed red and lifeless. This plague was a judgment on the Nile god, Hapi, who was supposed to bring fertility and life to Egypt. But here, the river of life became a river of death. Pharaoh's magicians replicated the miracle through secret arts, but their hearts remained unmoved. The second plague, frogs. Next came a plague of frogs. Thousands and thousands of frogs swarming into houses, bedrooms, and kitchens. Frogs covered the land like a living carpet, invading every corner of Egypt. Frogs were sacred to Hecate, the goddess of fertility and childbirth. This invasion mocked their god and showed his impotence. Pharaoh pleaded with Moses and Aaron to pray for the frogs' removal, promising to let the Israelites go. But once the frogs died and Pharaoh's land was cleared, his heart hardened again, and he broke his promise. The third plague, gnats or lice. Aaron struck the dust of the earth with his staff, and the dust turned into gnats that swarmed over people and animals alike. The Egyptian magicians tried to replicate this, but they could not. This plague demonstrated the futility of Egyptian magic. The fourth plague, flies. Swarming flies filled the houses and land of Egypt, sparing only the land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived. The contrast was clear. God was protecting his people even in judgment. The flies tormented Pharaoh and his subjects alike. The fifth plague, death of livestock. All the livestock of Egypt died. Horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, sheep, and goats. Yet the Israelites' livestock remained unharmed. This plague struck at Egypt's wealth and sustenance, undermining their gods and economy. The sixth plague, boils. Painful boils broke out on man and beast, a humiliating and debilitating affliction. Even the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the sores. The seventh plague, hail. A fierce storm of hail mixed with fire thundered down from the sky, smashing crops and killing people and animals caught outdoors. The Egyptians worshipped Nut, the sky goddess, but she was powerless to stop the destruction. The eighth plague, locusts. Swarms of locusts descended upon Egypt, devouring every green thing left after the hail. The land was stripped bare. Pharaoh's officials begged him to relent, but his stubbornness continued. The ninth plague, darkness. For 3 days, darkness covered Egypt so thick it could be felt. No one could see or move. Yet in Goshen there was light. This plague mocked Ra, the sun god, the chief deity of Egypt, showing that only the God of Israel had true power over light and life. The final plague and the institution of Passover. The 10th plague was the most devastating and personal. God declared that every firstborn in Egypt, human and animal, would die. From Pharaoh's heir to the lowliest slave's child, no one would be spared. Pharaoh's heart was finally broken after this terrible blow, but it came at great cost. The preparation for the Passover. God instructed Moses to tell the Israelites to prepare for the night of deliverance with specific instructions that would mark them as his people and protect them from the coming judgment. Each family was to take a perfect, unblemished year-old male lamb and slaughter it at twilight. They would take the blood and paint it on the doorposts and lintels of their homes. The lamb's meat was to be roasted and eaten quickly with unleavened bread and bitter herbs, dressed to travel, ready for the journey ahead. God promised that when he saw the blood on the doors, he would pass over those houses, sparing the firstborn within. The night of the plague. That night, a dreadful silence fell over Egypt. At midnight, the Lord struck down every firstborn son in Egypt. From Pharaoh's own palace to the prisoner in the dungeon, death reigned. Pharaoh awoke in terror, grief ripping through his heart. He summoned Moses and Aaron in haste. "Go, take your people and leave my land," he cried. The exodus begins. At last, the Israelites gathered their belongings, guided by God's command. They left in haste, carrying unleavened bread because there was no time for the dough to rise. Their journey began under the cover of darkness, guided by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, God's constant presence among them. The journey into the wilderness. As the first light of dawn broke over Egypt, the Israelite camp was already stirring. The people, men, women, and children, prepared to leave the land that had been their prison for so many years. Their hearts were a mixture of hope, fear, and anticipation. They did not yet know what lay ahead, but the promise of freedom propelled them forward. God guided them with miraculous signs. A pillar of cloud by day hovered above the camp, providing shade from the scorching sun. At night, a pillar of fire illuminated their path, offering warmth and comfort in the cool desert darkness. The journey was not easy. Their path led into the vast, harsh wilderness, barren deserts with blistering heat by day and freezing cold by night. Food and water were scarce, yet the Israelites trusted in God's presence with them. Pharaoh's pursuit. Though Pharaoh had let the Israelites go, his heart hardened once more. He could not bear to lose such a valuable labor force and pursued them with his army, horsemen, chariots, and troops numbering in the thousands. The Israelites found themselves trapped between the advancing Egyptian army and the vast waters of the Red Sea, also called the Sea of Reeds. Fear gripped the people. They cried out to Moses, accusing him of leading them into the desert to die. But Moses answered with faith and courage, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." The miraculous crossing of the Red Sea. At Moses' command, the people moved forward toward the sea. Then, something incredible happened. God instructed Moses to raise his staff over the waters. The wind began to blow fiercely, driving the sea back and causing the water to part, creating towering walls of water on either side. The seabed was exposed, a dry path through the water. The Israelites crossed on dry ground, their feet sinking into the sand but safe from drowning. Behind them, Pharaoh's army followed, driving their chariots and horses into the path. As the last Israelites reached the far shore, Moses stretched his hand over the sea once again. The waters crashed down with thunderous force, engulfing the chariots, horses, and soldiers. Not one escaped. The song of deliverance. That day, the Israelites witnessed the saving power of God. Miriam, Moses' sister, took a tambourine and led the women in a song of praise. "Sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea." The people celebrated, rejoicing in their freedom and in the God who had rescued them. The journey through the wilderness and God's provision. After crossing the Red Sea, the Israelites found themselves in the vast, unforgiving wilderness. The sand stretched endlessly, and the harsh sun beat down mercilessly by day, while cold winds chilled the night. The bitter waters at Marah. The first challenge came swiftly. They arrived at a place called Marah, where the water was bitter and undrinkable. The people grumbled, their spirits faltering after the triumph of the sea crossing. Moses cried out to the Lord, who showed him a piece of wood to throw into the water. Upon doing so, the water turned sweet and life-giving. This was a sign that God was with them, providing even when the path was difficult. Manna from heaven. As the days passed, hunger gnawed at the people. They had left Egypt with little food and had no farms or herds to feed themselves in the desert. God instructed Moses to tell the people that he would provide bread from heaven. Each morning, a fine, flaky substance covered the ground, the manna. The Israelites gathered the manna daily, just enough for each person. If they tried to save some for the next day, it spoiled and bred worms. On the sixth day, however, they gathered twice as much to rest on the Sabbath. This miraculous provision was a daily reminder of God's care and the importance of obedience and trust. Water from the rock. Again, the people thirsted. They came to a place called Rephidim, but no water was there. The people quarreled with Moses, accusing him of bringing them out to die of thirst. Moses turned to God in prayer. God told him to strike a certain rock with his staff. When Moses obeyed, water gushed forth, providing drink for the people and their livestock. This miracle reinforced God's power and mercy amid the wilderness trials. The battle with Amalek. While the Israelites camped at Rephidim, they were attacked by the Amalekites. Moses commanded Joshua to choose men and fight. During the battle, Moses stood on a hill with the staff of God raised high. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites prevailed. When he lowered them in exhaustion, Amalek gained the advantage. Aaron and Hur came to support Moses by holding up his hands until sunset, ensuring victory. This battle taught the people reliance on God and each other. Arrival at Mount Sinai. After traveling for several months, the Israelites came to the foot of Mount Sinai. There, God called Moses up the mountain to speak directly with him. The mountain trembled, covered in smoke and fire, and thunder rolled like a mighty storm. God gave Moses the 10 Commandments, laws to guide the people in their relationship with him and with each other. These commandments formed the foundation of Israel's covenant with God. The giving of the 10 Commandments. On the morning of the third day after arriving at Mount Sinai, a thick cloud covered the mountain, and the whole mountain trembled with the presence of the Lord. Thunder roared and lightning flashed, while a loud trumpet blast echoed through the valley. The people were terrified and stood at the foot of the mountain, watching from a distance. Moses entered the thick cloud, ascending into the presence of God. There, God spoke directly to Moses, delivering a sacred code, the 10 Commandments. These commandments were not merely rules but a covenant, a holy agreement between God and his chosen people. God spoke, "You shall have no other gods before me." God demanded exclusive worship, rejecting idolatry and affirming his sovereignty. You shall not make for yourself any carved image. No idol or statue was to stand in place of the invisible God. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Respect for God's name was paramount. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 1 day in 7 was set apart for rest and worship. Honor your father and your mother. Respect for family was foundational. You shall not murder. Life was sacred. You shall not commit adultery. Faithfulness in relationships was commanded. You shall not steal. Respect for others' property was required. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Truthfulness was essential. You shall not covet. Contentment with one's own possessions and life was encouraged. The covenant confirmed. After the commandments were delivered, God proclaimed a solemn covenant with Israel. He declared them his treasured possession, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. The people, trembling with awe, promised to obey all the Lord's words. Moses returned to the people and relayed their vow. In response, Moses built an altar at the foot of the mountain and sacrificed young bulls as offerings. The blood was sprinkled on the altar and on the people, symbolizing the sealing of the covenant. God's presence remained thick around the mountain like a consuming fire. The laws and instructions. Beyond the 10 Commandments, God gave Moses hundreds of additional laws covering worship, social justice, personal conduct, and purity. These detailed instructions governed the construction of the tabernacle, the portable sanctuary where God would dwell among his people, the priesthood, including the ordination of Aaron and his sons, rituals for sacrifices, atonement, and festivals, justice systems to protect the vulnerable and maintain fairness, rules of cleanliness and holiness, setting Israel apart from other nations. Every law was designed to teach holiness, justice, mercy, and love. The golden calf incident. While Moses was on the mountain for 40 days and nights, the people below grew restless and anxious. Fearing that Moses would not return, they pressured Aaron to make them an idol to worship. Aaron gathered gold from the people and fashioned a golden calf. The Israelites worshipped the calf with feasting and revelry, breaking the covenant they had just made. When Moses descended and saw their idolatry, his heart broke. In anger, he shattered the stone tablets. Moses pleaded with God on behalf of the people, asking for mercy. Though God's judgment was just, his compassion prevailed. Moses returned to the mountain to receive a renewed covenant, restoration and renewal. After the devastating moment of the golden calf, Moses stood as the mediator between God and the people. His intercession was a powerful plea for forgiveness, demonstrating the mercy and grace that underpinned God's covenant. God's anger was fierce, but his compassion was greater. Moses returned up Mount Sinai to receive a second set of stone tablets inscribed by God's own hand, symbolizing the renewal of the covenant and the chance for a fresh start. The tabernacle, God's dwelling among his people. God gave Moses detailed instructions for constructing the tabernacle, a portable sanctuary where his presence would dwell among the Israelites as they journeyed. The tabernacle was a magnificent tent-like structure with an outer courtyard, an inner holy place, and the most holy place or Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant rested. Every piece of the tabernacle, from the curtains of fine linen to the golden lampstand, the altar of incense, and the ark itself, was designed with precise detail and deep symbolism, reflecting holiness and God's glory. Skilled artisans among the people brought their best craftsmanship, dedicating gold, silver, bronze, fabrics, and precious stones to build the sanctuary. The priesthood and sacred duties. God appointed Aaron and his sons as priests to minister in the tabernacle. They were consecrated through sacred rites, wearing special garments that symbolized their holy office. The priests offered sacrifices for the people's sins, led worship, and maintained the sacred space where heaven met earth. This priesthood was vital in maintaining the relationship between God and his people. The cloud and the presence of God. Once the tabernacle was completed, the glory of the Lord filled it like a consuming fire. The pillar of cloud descended and rested over the tabernacle by day, and the pillar of fire by night, guiding the Israelites wherever they journeyed. God's presence was no longer distant. It was among his people, a constant source of protection, guidance, and reassurance. Continuing the journey, with the covenant renewed and the tabernacle established, the Israelites set out once more toward the promised land. Their path was still fraught with challenges: hunger, thirst, and battles, but they traveled under God's watchful eye. The story of Exodus is not just about deliverance from Egypt, but about God forming a people devoted to him, a people set apart to live in holiness and justice. Lessons of faith and obedience in the wilderness. The wilderness was a place of testing and transformation for the Israelites. God used the hardships of the desert to teach his people to depend on him completely. Rebellion and complaints. Despite God's constant provision, the people often complained about the lack of food and water, longing for the comforts of Egypt. They grumbled against Moses and Aaron, expressing doubt and fear. One notable episode was when the people demanded meat, complaining about manna's monotony. God provided quail in abundance, but the episode revealed the tension between faith and distrust. The role of Moses as leader. Moses bore the heavy burden of leadership. He interceded for the people when God's wrath was kindled against their repeated disobedience. When the people rebelled at Mount Horeb, refusing to enter the promised land out of fear, Moses pleaded with God to forgive them. The 12 spies. Before entering Canaan, Moses sent 12 spies to scout the land. They returned with reports of fertile soil and great cities, but 10 spies spread fear, describing the inhabitants as giants and the land as unconquerable. Only Joshua and Caleb trusted God's promise and urged the people to proceed. Because of their lack of faith, God decreed that the Israelites would wander in the wilderness for 40 years, until the disbelieving generation passed away. The final preparations. As the years passed, the new generation of Israelites was trained and prepared to enter the land God had promised to their ancestors. Moses gave them final instructions, reminding them to obey God's laws, to worship only him, and to remember the journey they had taken. He appointed Joshua as his successor, charging him to lead with courage and faith. the death of Moses and legacy. Before entering the Promised Land, Moses climbed Mount Nebo to view the land from afar. There, God showed him the full extent of the territory the Israelites would inherit, but Moses was told he would not cross over. Moses died on the mountain, mourned by the people as a great prophet, leader, and servant of God. His life was marked by humility, perseverance, and intimate communion with God, a journey of transformation. The story of Exodus is a grand narrative of liberation, covenant, and identity. From slavery to freedom, from wandering to nationhood, the Israelites' journey was shaped by God's power and faithfulness. Their struggles and triumphs serve as timeless lessons in trust, obedience, and the pursuit of holiness.